Hello, Moira here from daisyknots. Welcome to week 1 of the Daisy Sampler Cal. The body section that we're going to be looking at today for week 1 is worked actually in rows. You can see in this bright version that's all worked up in rows, and then week 2 we'll add the border and then we'll start working in the round. There are 2 charts for this week's pattern, and they each have 29 rows per chart. The chart is split into 2 just to simply make it easier for you to read. You should have already chosen which colourway it is that you wish to use, whether it's the bright colourway, the muted colourway, or the tapestry colourway. There's a separate video tutorial explaining how to work the tapestry mosaic section. However, I would only add this section into your blanket if you're an experienced crocheter. Today's week 1 video tutorial, I'm going to be using the muted colourway. These are my 5 colours that I'm going to be using for the muted colourway. So we have A as the off-white, B is our mid-grey, C is our dark grey, D is our pearl grey, and E is our lemon. All the charts have this colour key at the bottom, and you can insert your own colourway into this key. All of my charts tell you the colour of the row and the number of the row at the right hand side and at the left hand side too. For the body section, I'm going to be using colour A and colour B. I start with row 0, the foundation row, with colour A, my off-white colour. As I'm demonstrating the muted version, I'm working with a 5mm hook for my yarn. Row 0, your foundation row, you can either chain 64 chains and then work a double crochet into those chains, or work a foundation double crochet row of 63 stitches. This week's section has got 58 rows to the pattern. The bottom part of the chart has got 29 rows, and the top part of the chart has got another 29 rows, which gives us 58, and then the last row is a slip stitch row. That slip stitch row is put in so that we actually have a little bit of symmetry going on with the bottom foundation row. So using the appropriate hook for your yarn, we're now going to create our first border stitch. We're going to insert our hook through both the front and back loops, get our colour B and pull the yarn through, and then we're going to create a chain stitch. When you've created this chain stitch, give it a tug to fix it in position. Insert your hook through exactly the same stitch again and work a double crochet stitch. And remember, I work in UK terminology, so that will be a single crochet stitch in the US. And looking at row 1 in my chart, all the boxes on row 1 are empty, no crosses. So remember, this means work a double crochet into the back loop only when we have an empty box. And we're not interested in the colour of the boxes, we're only interested in whether there's a cross or an empty box. Work 61 stitches in double crochet back loop only. There you go, I'm just about finished the end of this first row. I've got 3 more double crochet back loop onlys to do, and then I'm ready to do the last border stitch. So the last stitch is slightly different. What we're going to do in that last stitch is go through both the front and the back loops and do a double crochet. So working into both loops, not just the back loop, both loops, double crochet, and then once I've done my double crochet, I'm going to create a chain stitch. Now the chain stitch is just really to fix my stitch at the end, just very similar to what I did for the beginning chain stitch. So work that chain stitch at the end and pull your yarn through and give your chain stitch a good tug to fix the stitch. Row 1's done, so I'm going to give it a tick. Gives me a sense of satisfaction and it allows me to know where I am in my chart. When working on my charts, I usually work on a board that's got a sliding ruler on it. However, it's not suitable to use with my videos, so I'm going to use this metal ruler instead to actually show where I am in the chart. I always work with the row that I'm working on at the just below the ruler. You can then see exactly what it is you've got to do. Row 2's got some crosses in it, and a cross means to treble crochet into the front loop 2 rows below. So row 2, we start with a first border stitch, so we go through both the front and back loops, create a chain stitch to join our new yarn, which is yarn A again, and then we go through both the same stitch again, both front and back loops, and we create a double crochet stitch, and this is our first border stitch, which gives us that nice neat edge which we're looking for up the side of our crochet. So the first stitch after our first border stitch we've got to do is that treble crochet into the front loop 2 rows down. Now remember, treble crochet is UK terms, so it will be double crochet for US terms. So we're not going into the next stitch of the grey, we're going to go into the next stitch, but it's the row 2 rows down, which is the white. So we're actually covering up the grey stitch is what we're going to be doing, and we go into the front loop only, and we work up from the bottom to the top. Can you see I'm putting my hook in there, up, bottom to top, and then we work our treble stitch as normal. Now by picking up that front loop, it actually creates a overlay stitch. This is why it's called overlay crochet. An overlay stitch over the top of that stitch to the side. We do not work into the back of that grey stitch. We make sure that that stitch is covered up by our overlay stitch. Looking at our chart, we've got 3 double crochets to work, and we know that it's 3 double crochets because the boxes are all empty. We don't care about the different colours of the boxes, just whether there's a cross in it. And these double crochets are worked into the back loop only. You can see I've got that treble done, and then I've got 3 double crochets done before my next treble stitch. Now I refer to these treble stitches as drop trebles because treble into the row 2 rows down is a very big mouthful. Because there's no repeat in this pattern, it's one long continuous pattern, which is 61 stitches. I always use my drop trebles to count along the pattern so I know exactly where I am. So I can see I've done 2 drop trebles, and then I'm counting 6 double crochets before the next drop treble. Remember, make sure you're covering up that stitch, that double crochet stitch that's got the treble in front of it. You don't work into that one. So count along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 double crochet stitches into the back loop only, and then I'm ready to do my next drop treble. So I'm ready for my next drop treble. I've identified where it's going, and I work my hook in from the bottom upwards, and I work my treble. I'm making sure that that stitch, the double crochet stitch from the row below, is covered up. I don't go into that. It's the stitch after that that I go into for the next double crochet into the back loop. And then I have another drop treble. Again, you can see I identify where it is with my thumb and work my hook upwards before working that treble. You'll see me counting the drop trebles a lot to always identify where I am in the pattern. So I know I've done 4 drop trebles, and then I'm counting the next set of squares before I have to actually do the next drop treble. So it's 6 more double crochets before the next drop treble. So in this next set of stitches, there's another drop treble, 2 double crochets, and then a second drop treble. So I'm just laying my work out so far just to check that I've got the same amount of drop trebles as the pattern. You can see I've got 6, and then I've got this big section in the center that is just double crochet only. So I need to work out how many double crochets there are in there. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 double crochet stitches in between the 2 drop trebles. Remember, you're covering up that stitch that the treble is overlaying and starting in the stitch after that. So I'm counting now 11 double crochets. So once I've worked all those double crochets, I will just check that I have got 11. I am a bit paranoid when it comes to actually counting quite a lot of stitches. We're now working the reverse of the pattern that we worked in the first 30 stitches, as our pattern after stitch 31, which is the center, is a mirror image of the first side. Therefore, this group of stitches is 1 drop treble, 2 double crochets, and another drop treble. And then we're going to have, like we had before, 6 double crochets until the next group of stitches. And the next group of stitches are a drop treble, 2 double crochets, and another drop treble, and then we'll have another 6 double crochets. So that's a drop treble, 2 double crochets, another drop treble, and then another 6 double crochets. So we're just about at the end of this second row, and you can see we've got 1 drop treble and 3 double crochets and a final drop treble before that last border stitch. So working that drop treble, making sure that the stitch is covered up before we do our next double crochet. I have 2 more double crochets to do before the final drop treble. We always have a drop treble, by the way, on stitch 1 and stitch 61 on our colour A rows, because this allows the body to be framed in colour A. And remember that special stitch at the end, the last border stitch, we go through both the front and back loops, pull through and create a double crochet, and then we end with a chain stitch. We then cut our yarn and fasten off, and we pull it through and give it a good tug so that it really does knot that stitch at the end. And that's row 2 completed. Now row 2 is completed, I'm actually going to count up my drop trebles, both on the chart, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and on my work. And I'm just checking that I've got 12 drop trebles there. I have, so I'm happy. So I can now tick row 2 to see that I've completed it, and I can look at row 3. So the chart's telling me that the first stitch is a double crochet, and then the next stitch is a drop treble. Remember, at the beginning of each row we have a special stitch called a first border stitch, which we go through both the front and back loop, and we are now going to join our yarn with a chain stitch. Once you've created that chain stitch, always remember and give it a good tug. That sits it in position. back through the same stitch again and then create the double crochet stitch, and that is our first border stitch completed. Now referring to our chart again, we have a double crochet stitch for the very first stitch, and then we have a drop treble. The drop treble is immediately after the drop treble from the row below. So if you aren't there, you know you've done something wrong. Our chart's now telling us we've got 3 double crochets before we do the next drop treble. And again, the next drop treble is immediately after the drop treble from the row below. The next part of this group of stitches is 2 double crochets and then another drop treble. I'm just going to look at my work to compare how many drop trebles I've done with the actual chart. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So now I'm looking at the rest of the chart. Next few stitches are 6 double crochets before that first drop treble. I often wish I could actually crochet at the speed of my fast forward button. Once you've done the 6 double crochets, we are now ready to do that drop treble. You can see you've got a drop treble there, and then we have, after that drop treble, another 2 double crochets. One more drop treble, we have 6 more double crochets, and then a drop treble before we hit the center section. There's our 6 double crochets and the drop treble immediately after that. So we've got a lot of drop trebles coming up, but before that we've got to work 2 double crochets. I'm just going to compare my work, the amount of drop trebles I have compared to the amount on the chart, and I should have 6 and I have. We're now at the centre of row 3 where there are 5 drop trebles. Once we've completed our 5 drop trebles, we've now finished the centre of the pattern, and we're back to working our pattern in reverse from the other side, just like we did with row 2. When you've worked so many drop trebles, it's always a good idea to count the back stitches. I'm counting to make sure I've got 5 stitches behind my drop trebles here, so that I actually go into the correct double crochet stitch when I start after my drop trebles. Remember, in row 2, after the centre stitches, we created a mirror image of our pattern. It's exactly the same here, so after our 5 drop trebles, we are now working a mirror image. So I've just worked 2 double crochets and 1 drop treble. So referring back to our chart, we've got 6 double crochets to work before the next set of drop trebles. So I've got 2 double crochets to work because I've already worked the drop treble, and then another drop treble. And because we are working the pattern in reverse, this time your drop trebles come before the drop treble from the previous row, not after it. So we have another 6 double crochets to do before our next drop treble. There's our drop treble, then we've got 2 double crochets and another drop treble to do. We're just about at the end of the row, and be careful, there's 3 double crochets this time before that final drop treble, not 2. So it's 3 double crochets and then the final drop treble. And the last stitch on this row is a double crochet stitch before we work that last border stitch like we did in the previous 2 rows. So remember, the last border stitch is through both front and back loops, double crochet, and then a chain stitch to end. And after we've fastened off, make sure that you give that chain stitch a good tug. When I complete a row, I always scan my work that I've just completed to check that it's exactly the same as the chart row looks like. And once I'm happy that it looks the same, I then tick the row. So row 4, I'm just reading the pattern. It's 1 drop treble, 1 double crochet and 1 drop treble to start. Looking ahead in the pattern, how many drop trebles we've got before the centre? We've got 6 drop trebles before we have that centre section. I've already worked my first border stitch, so it's now that drop treble, which is worked into the front loop of the drop treble from row 2. Remember I said colour A, stitch 1 and stitch 61 is always a drop treble as it frames our body section. The next section of the pattern are 6 double crochets for the drop treble. We then have got 2 double crochets and a drop treble to do. Referring back to the chart, we have 6 more double crochets into the back loop, and then we have our next drop treble. So after this drop treble, we have 2 double crochets and then another drop treble, and then we're into that sort of central section. I'm just going to check with my pattern that you can actually count how many drop trebles we've done. I've done 6 so far to where I need to go, and now that central section I need to actually work out how many squares they have. And the reason I've gone on to row 5 is because I can actually see the squares easier with the crosses from the row above. Just counting the double crochet stitches to see how many I need, and it's 15 that I require. "15 double crochet stitches worked. I'm just now going to confirm that I actually have worked 15 double crochet stitches. So I'm just checking here, my drop treble is in front of the drop treble from the previous colour A row, and yes, it's actually in the correct position, so that's a good check to check that you're in the correct position. I've now 2 double crochets and then another drop treble to work. And this next drop treble should be in front of the drop treble from the previous row, or in my case the mid-grey row. So looking ahead at our pattern, we've another 6 double crochets and then another drop treble. So 2 more double crochets and 1 drop treble. 6 double crochets before those final group of drop trebles. And then just at the end of our row, remember it's 1 drop treble, 1 double crochet, and then the final drop treble. And then we work our last border stitch into both front and back loops, work our double crochet, and then our final chain to end. And remember, pull that chain nice and tight. And row 4 is now complete. We can really start to see the pattern emerging now. Those white boxes are starting to branch out from the centre. So row 4 is completed, so I can now tick it and look at row 5. I've already completed my first border stitch and I counted 3 double crochets before that first treble. After treble 1 is 2 double crochets and then 1 more drop treble. Now I suspect after that drop treble, but I will confirm it in a few minutes, it is 6 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, I was correct. It's 6 double crochets and then another drop treble. So after the 6 double crochets, we then have another drop treble, 2 double crochets, and then 1 more drop treble. We then have another 6 double crochets and 1 drop treble. I'm just confirming that I've actually got the same amount of drop trebles, which are 5, in my actual work before I start on the centre section. So the centre section has got 2 double crochets and then 3 drop trebles. And I'm just confirming 1, 2, 3 double crochets behind those drop trebles before I started on my next 3 double crochets, and then we've got 3 drop trebles again. So it's 2 double crochets, 1 drop treble, and then another 6 double crochets. We're working our pattern in reverse. Remember, after the centre stitches, after stitch 31, we have a mirror image of our pattern. I've worked the first drop treble there. I'm going to go check the chart. So you can see I have another 2 double crochets and 1 more drop treble to work. Then we've got the final 6 double crochets to do for this row, and then another drop treble. So for the end of this row, we've got 2 double crochets to work and 1 more drop treble. 3 double crochets to go before that last border stitch. And you should be very familiar with the last border stitch by now. You go through both the front and back loops, do your double crochet, and then work your chain and fasten off. And that completes row 5 of our daisy sampler body. Now we've done 5 rows, you should have a good idea of how to follow the charts. So I'm not going to demonstrate any more of the charts row by row. As there's 59 rows, it would take a long time. I am aware that some people have difficulties in following charts, so I'm going to give you some tips on how to write the charts out in a little shorthand. I've got 2 versions that I'm showing you. So firstly, I'm going to write the chart out as a normal crochet pattern, and then I'm going to do it in a slightly shorthand version. So I start with the first border stitch, then I've got a drop treble. I'm going to write it as a treble, I'm not writing it as a drop treble. And next I have 6 double crochets into the back loop only, but I'm just going to write these as double crochets, so 6 DCs. Then I have another treble, 2 double crochets, 1 more treble. Then I have another 6 double crochets, 1 more treble, 2 double crochets, and I can see another treble there as well. That's one method of writing out our chart pattern, and the next method I'm going to show you is even quicker. I'm doing a little bit of a more shorthand version. So that was 8 double crochets, and the treble I'm just doing as a cross, and then 1 double crochet, another drop treble, and then that's another 8 double crochets and another treble, 2 double crochets and another treble. Next we have 6 double crochets, another drop treble, 2 double crochets and another drop treble. And finally we have 6 double crochets and the last drop treble. And don't forget to write your last border stitch at the end. So 2 slightly different ways of writing out your chart if you prefer reading instructions rather than looking at charts. So here's what row 6 should look like once you've completed it. You can see that you've got all those drop trebles lined up. I'm just checking the center there. And then all the little boxes, all the white boxes, they're quite easy to actually see. The colour A boxes, they're lined up too. I'm now going to complete row 7 and I'll let you see what it looks like once I've worked it. Row 7 is complete. You can see in that centre you've got that U with the little arms as we are seeing in our pattern. I am now going to work on row 8, and again I'll let you see row 8 when I've completed it. Don't forget to keep ticking off your rows as you complete them. This is what row 8 should look like when you've completed it. My even coloured light rows are a lot easier to see with the pattern than the darker grey rows. However, I'm going to carry on now with row 9, but I'm actually going to demonstrate a little bit of row 9 because there is something I just want to bring to your attention. So row 9, I've already worked the first border stitch and the first double crochet. I'm just working that first drop treble. Why I wanted to recap a little bit on here is because these squares here, normally we've had 6, but in this row we now have got 7. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention that there are actually 7 double crochets along here. So do make sure that you count 7 and not 6. So there should also be 7 double crochets at the end before that last treble. So do be aware of this as well. Row 9 now complete, so I can tick it off. I'm not going to now demonstrate what every row looks like, as we've got 59 rows. That could still take a long time. So I'm going to now carry on and work the next 5 rows, and I will let you see what my work looks like at the end of row 14. 14 rows now complete, and the texture is really starting to show. I just love texture. This is why I like mosaic crochet so much, especially the overlay style. That centre V section at the moment is really starting to be prominent, and it looks absolutely beautiful. And then the little wings either side, they are starting to be very prominent too. Going to work on now to row 18, so I will come back after I have worked on the next 4 rows. So this is what our pattern should look like after row 18, and the way to check that our pattern is on track is, are our little boxes and our little spacers lined up? That's what I keep checking. Am I lined up then? If you want to do the tapestry mosaic section of the daisy sampler, row 19 is where the tapestry section starts, and there's a separate tutorial for the tapestry mosaic section. So if you wish to do this, head on over to see the video tutorial for the mosaic tapestry section. I'm now going to continue and work all the rest of the rows on this chart right up to row 29. Just be aware on row 29 that there's quite a lot of double crochets only on that top row there. At the beginning and at the end there's quite a few spaces, so make sure your count is correct there. I've now completed all 29 rows of the body, so that's the bottom part of the body completed, and I'm now ready to go and look at the chart 2, or the top chart of the body. And again, I have another 29 rows to do there as well. I'm going to quickly work row 30 with you because it can be tricky, the fact that you've got all these crosses but you can't really see below. So I will just quickly go through this particular row. So I've already worked the first border stitch and I'm now working the very first drop treble. Then there are 3 double crochet stitches to work before the next 3 drop trebles. I've then got 2 double crochets and 2 more drop trebles showing in the chart. Then it's 8 double crochets before the next drop treble. It's then 4 double crochets before the next drop treble. Two double crochets after that, and then 1 more drop treble. We're now at the center of the pattern, and there's 5 double crochets to do here before we do the next drop treble. Okay, so I've now got 2 more double crochets to do, and then my drop treble, and that's the center part of the pattern all completed. And then I've got 4 double crochets before the next drop treble. Number 4 going in there, and then there's my last drop treble there. After I've completed that drop treble, I've now got 8 double crochets to work before the next 2 drop trebles. And then it's the same as the beginning, 2 drop trebles, 2 double crochets and 3 drop trebles. And then right at the end of the row, 3 double crochets and 1 last drop treble. And then something you'll be very familiar with now, the last border stitch, in through both front and back loops, and do a double crochet and then the chain to finish. So row 30 complete, and that middle section should be kind of lining up. You can see where I'm actually starting to line up the sections of the drop trebles there. I'm now going to carry on and work all the way up to row 40. We're now working on a flipped image, a flipped horizontal image this time, so it is really like a mirror image, but it's flipped horizontally. So again, though we were working from side to side, we still are doing that, but we're now going back on ourselves as well. So I will work on and let you see when we get to row 40. Here we have it, up to row 40 completed. If you decided to work the centre diamond as tapestry mosaic, you will have just finished your tapestry mosaic section 2. It's easy to spot now how our pattern has actually been flipped horizontally. I'm going to now work up to row 50, the next 10 rows, and I will come back and let you see what it looks like after working those 10 rows. So row 50 completed, and we can now see that that outer diamond is very prominent. I hope that your body is looking exactly the same as mine, albeit maybe in a different colourway. So we're now ready to crack on and complete the next 8 rows, which will take us up to row 58. So we've completed up to row 58, with that last 8 rows, and that's the patterned section of the body now completed with working those last 8 rows. Row 59 is a slip stitch row into the back loop only. And this row 59 is added so that we've got a little bit of symmetry going on with the top row and the bottom row of our body section. There we go, you can actually see the bottom there. So row 59 is started and ended with the first border stitch and the last border stitch, the way that we're used to doing it. So again, joining our yarn with our chain stitch through both loops and then through both loops again and creating a double crochet. This is where it's different. We're now going to work slip stitches into the back loop only. So the next stitch is a slip stitch in the back loop, pull through, and we're going to carry on doing this for the whole row, slip stitching into the back loop only. Try to keep your slip stitches quite loose because we do need to work into these stitches when we're creating our slip stitch border around. And what this row is allowing us to do, it is mimicking the row at the bottom where we created our either our foundation row or our chain row. This is effectively mimicking the chain row for the very first row that we created. You can now see that that top section we've just worked with a slip stitch row is very similar to the bottom section. It's not identical, but it's as close as I can make it. These two borders, the top and the bottom, along with the treble stitches that we created at the side in our colour A, has now framed our pattern body section beautifully, ready for our slip stitch border frame. So continue working the slip stitch into the back loop, making it quite loose, remember, until you get to the last border stitch. And when you get to the last border stitch, I work it slightly differently. I just did a slip stitch there instead of a double crochet, and then a chain to finish. So now we have a nice top edge, the edge down the side and along the bottom, and then up the other side, all framing off that patterned body section beautifully. So week 1 tutorial is now complete, and I will see you in the next video tutorial, which will be explaining and demonstrating how to work the slip stitch round.